Hey everyone, it's Arry. I'm the co-host of Windshield Time with Day, and I'm also the chair of the Cascadia Blockchain Council. I've been hosting these weekly AMAs, which are Ask Me Anythings, and it's been really great. Sometimes we get a handful of people, sometimes we have a full room. And recently, people have been asking me to record them, which is kind of weird for me. And it really shouldn't be weird because I do record pretty often, but now, yeah, so I thought I would record this one. We went over some Bitcoin fundamentals. I threw together some key points on why I think Bitcoin is very useful and why humanity really needs it. And yeah, so I hope this is very helpful to you. And if you have any feedback, feel free to leave any comments. If you like it, like and subscribe and share. And I hope to see you at one of these Friday sessions. Again, they're Friday from 12 to 1. You can join us on Meetup or Eventbrite or our Facebook group. There are a lot of different ways to find me, or you can always find me on Twitter at Arry in Seattle, and I'm happy to share a link with you. Hope this is helpful, and I definitely believe in Bitcoin in terms of fundamentally what it does for humanity and what humanity really needs. Anyway, enjoy! Yeah, so I came out of the world of basically coins. Did an ICO, which is an initial coin offering. We raised about $32 million in about 1 month in 2017. And it was $32 million of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Metal, Ethereum, and Quantum. And then today, I also served as the chair of the Cascadia Blockchain Council. So after the whole ICO experience, thought we needed to do a lot of work on the education awareness side and also working with policymakers to bring stuff together in working with innovators. And then I also am the lead instructor of a blockchain developer bootcamp today. So I also teach blockchain full-time, which is why when I say I talk about Bitcoin and blockchain for 12 to 14 hours a day, I literally am. And then there's other human stuff that I do. I'm a mom, I love food, I love music, and I love nerdy stuff. Okay. You're Perfect. Not here to learn about me only. You're here to about Bitcoin. So let me share screen quickly. Present. All right. So Bitcoin has been really exciting, especially this past day, this past month, this past year. Bitcoin, last I checked, was about $40,000 today. It's up over 37% in January, and that was as of yesterday when I last checked. It's up over 48% in December, over 170% in the last quarter of 2020, and up over 300% in the year of 2020. So pretty good stats on Bitcoin, and that's probably why a lot of people are excited about it, which is really great. And we're not the only ones excited. The whole market is excited. And this is just a quick, I jotted down as many things that have happened very recently, but you have PayPal, you have Stan Druckenmiller, who's, a very famous money investor guy that is very well respected. He's talking about, Bitcoin as an investment. Coinbase, if you're already into crypto and Bitcoin, it's one of the on-ramps or ways people get into crypto these days. And so they're about to IPO. You have MicroStrategy, which is a publicly traded company. They took a good percentage of their treasury and put it into Bitcoin, over $425 million originally. And then a couple months after that, he did another $650 million into Bitcoin, over $1 billion of Bitcoin purchased over a few months. You have institutions like Mass Mutual buying Bitcoin. You have NFL players like Russell Okung, and I spelled his name wrong, I'm sorry, Russell, saying he wants half his pay in Bitcoin. You have Spotify investing into this world. You have Standard Chartered Bank is launching crypto banking and trading. You have JP Morgan talking about it. You have Visa doing USDC, which is a stable coin. And also an on-ramp into this cryptocurrency world. And so this is happening. But what I'm going to talk about is not all this fun stuff, but the stuff that is the why. Why is this happening right now? Why is Bitcoin this seemingly, really like underground weird thing that these cypherpunks talked about over the last 10 years. Why is this thing still alive, one, and what problem does it solve? And this quote, confusion has become a state of mind, more or less. We're trained to be confused. People in power are keeping us down, keeping us docile, keeping us consuming with this confusion. It is cultural confusion and it is deliberate. This is speaking to my own personal experience, especially over the past year. So like I said before, I've been talking about blockchain and Bitcoin for years, but it's only in the past year where I was really lucky. I had a baby about 18 months ago. And you know, post-baby, I had lots of support and I had lots of time to read books. Like I've read, you know, 800-page books on the Federal Reserve. I was writing articles. I was, you know, putting together this curriculum for this developer boot camp that I'm teaching right now. And the more I learned, the more I realized that like this quote is literally how I've been taught and educated and all the things that I have been assuming to date. And I'm normally considered a pretty educated, pretty, you know, not too dumb person. And so to know that I have been really misinformed and really miseducated on so many things, on so many fundamental levels, is why I really believe in Bitcoin. I really believe Bitcoin is the answer that the world really needs. And so I'll walk you through the thought process. And it's not my own unique thought process. This is the thought process that I've been the benefactor of receiving from just having read and worked with and just many of the pioneers that have done this thinking before me. So most of this is not original thought. Just want to put that caveat out there. So the problem Bitcoin solves is monetary and fiscal irresponsibility. And what does that mean? And so I just put 4 examples of what that means. So in 1971, and it's a big year, the United States went off the gold standard and officially became fiat money. And you'll hear Bitcoiners talk about 1971, the gold standard, sound money, hard money, soft money, fiat money a lot. And this is like the thing that really hone in on and hammer on during this 20-minute-ish presentation, because I want to leave enough time for your questions. 2, the United States has literally printed over 37% of the entire history of the US dollar money supply in the past 1 year. And you know, I mean, just wrapping your head around that is just, right? 37% of the entire US supply of US dollars was printed in the past year, and there's more coming, right? There's a big stimulus package that's about to be, you know, passed. In it, we'll send money to a lot of Americans that really, really need help. But it's going to have a huge impact on what's happening, not just to us in the United States, but globally. Because remember, the US dollar is the world's global reserve currency. So everything that happens to the US dollar affects us all, in so many ways that I never really connected the dots on. 3, central bankers think they can control and manipulate the economy for better, right? There's interest rates, and most of them are 0. And we've been hearing about interest rates going to negative. We're like, what does that really mean? Well, I mean, you just look at your own bank account and into your savings bank account, right? Remember, I told you, like in the early 90s, I remember 6%, you know, in middle school, taking my, you know, $10 or $100 of birthday money and putting it in my savings account, and I got 6%. That does not happen today, right? And we're all working hard. We're still putting our money in bank accounts, which, side note, don't. Bank accounts, that's financial purgatory. Stop doing that. Yeah. Number 4, inflation is typically measured through CPI, Consumer Price Index. And this is where a lot of that misinformation and that confusion that I mentioned before has really been created. We're taught this in our school system. I went to a really prestigious university. I learned this in, you know, this prestigious university, and this was the only way that was taught, that this form of economics was the only way that money happens. And You know, you go become an investment banker at JP Morgan, which I almost did, I didn't. You're also taught it there. But the way it's actually measured, because when you actually think about it, you're like, how is CPI measured? And you start digging in there and you're like, well, that doesn't really represent me. Because like me as a consumer, right? I got a house, I gotta get a car, I have two children that I gotta prepare for school, you know. Like where do you shop? Where do you buy your food? Do you like to buy organic or not organic? These are all things that really affect how we buy stuff. And the CPI does not represent that. I'll continue on. All right, so hearing in on this point again, like 99% of people do not know how the US dollar works. 99% of people don't and won't know how Bitcoin works. But ultimately, what I'm going to talk about over the next 20-ish minutes is why Bitcoin is better than the US dollar and why everyone is going crazy in the marketplace in terms of Bitcoin and why it's going to continue to be this way. So some definitions: fiat money. Fiat money is government issued, it's paper. Remember in 1971, we went off the gold standard, and the governments control how much money is printed, what the interest rates is, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, and I just included a pretty picture to give you a sense of what's really been happening with the Federal Reserve and what happens in the world of fiat money. Inflation, like I mentioned before. Citizens are told that an inflation rate of 2 to 3% is normal. Policymakers are also taught and believe that an acceptable inflation rate is 2%. And then for those that are thinking about investing or have been thinking about investing, and I didn't even realize this until recently too, because I'm not an investor, not in the typical sense, right? We're taught just, you know, beat inflation and you'll be fine. But remember, inflation rate is 2 to 3%, and that's what we're told. CPI, Consumer Price Index, measures the percent change in the price of a basket of goods and services consumed by households. Just in that definition, you should also picture and note, not all households are the same. You have billionaires, and the goods and services that they consume are not like the goods and services that I consume as a consumer. And they're not the same goods and services that Joe Schmo, the bartender down the street, consumes. So this fact that there's this one universal CPI that informs us of what's really going on with the money supply is problematic. So now we'll go into a quick history lesson. In 1971, the US went off the gold standard. And there's a really great site that talks about what happened in 1971, and I'll share that with as many of you afterwards. That's really, really interesting. But literally, when we went off this hard-backed gold standard, lots of things changed in the United States. And if you look at the history, it impacts, women and equity. It affects education standards. It affects our cities. It affects our society. It affects education. It affects just housing prices. It affects every aspect of our lives, and it's been affecting every aspect of our lives over the last 20 plus 30, 50 years. And also, here's another side note. In 1971, when President Nixon officially decided that we went off the gold standard, he told the American people that this was going to be temporary. And this temporary experiment has not stopped. It's still going on. We're still on this temporary experiment of going off the gold standard. And here we are today. The problem with that is because money only has value because the country that prints it says it does. And fiat money is government controlled, it's government made, and the government can print as much of it as it wants. And we know in history, because we've seen it, you look at Germany, you look at, even today, you look at Turkey, you look at Venezuela, which is, the often pointed to example, doesn't end well. And then I learned about this term called quantitative easing. I was like, what's QE? What's quantitative easing? And you watch CNBC, watch CNN, they say QE a lot and they say quantitative easing a lot. It literally is central banks printing money. It's printing money to cover debts. And here's a nice chart that shows you like what's been really going on with all the printing that's been happening. And it hasn't ended well for many countries. And quantitative easing is not a good thing, as you can see. And like I mentioned before, over 37% of the entire US dollar supply has been printed in the past 1 year. This is a picture of that. Here's a picture of, 1971, we went off the gold standard and we went into fiat world. And this affects how we invest as a nation. It affects how we invest locally in our state and local governments. It affects how we do work or seek jobs or like what we define as productivity. And the problem with fiat money is those that are closest to where the money is printed and dispersed to human beings benefit the most. So today, I mean, if you look at just what's happening to the marketplace, you look at stock prices, right? We're all looking at the stock prices and you look at Tesla is at what, $750 a share. Is that right or is that not right? Like it's crazy, right? It's because the stock market, those stocks are closest to those that are printing the money, the banks, those that are getting the loans. But everybody else, Joe Schmo down the street who's a bartender, he's not in stocks. Stocks are only for the top 49% of Americans. The other 51% don't have IRAs, 401ks, any of that sort. And that's the real reality of the world we live in today. And I think it's a big problem. And fiat money steals wealth from the bottom. We're taught taxes, 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 but fiat money, when the governments can just print money to erase debt, doesn't happen. It happens magically, and it officially takes money from the bottom because your hard-earned dollar, as the bartender that just got the dollar tip, is now worth less. And it's not 2 to 3% less than last year. It's significantly worse. So we'll go into looking at Bitcoin and why Bitcoin is better money, but in it, I'll also talk about why the paper money that we have today that's called the US dollar is not as great as Bitcoin. So when you look at scarcity and total supply, for those that might have had some light introduction to economics, supply and demand, more supply usually means lower prices, right? So that same fundamental is in the world of Bitcoin. It's a hard cap supply. So there are only going to be ever created 21 million Bitcoins. And this is a very, 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 very important fact. And if you look at 21 million Bitcoins, and yes, people will say like, oh, people have lost them and some Bitcoins are lost forever. Yeah, but that makes, the scarcity even more dire. It's a very, very scarce asset. And if you look at how many people are in this country, how many people are in the state, how many people will actually be able to own one Bitcoin? Not that many. So like something to think about. You look at the US dollar on comparison, fiat money. Is there a hard cap supply? No. Remember, 37% was printed literally in the past year, and they're going to print another trillion something dollars right now. What does that do to all of us? Scarcity is a good thing when it comes to our money supply and where we store our wealth and where we earn our dollars. Without scarcity, prices go down, right? If everyone was able to just walk in and buy a house, I mean, maybe that would be good for society, but for those that are, looking at real estate as investment, the scarcity and the fact that, not anyone can just access them is somewhat a good thing. Then you look at scarcity and rate of change. So why is gold great? Because we know gold increases at the rate of 1.5%. It's really hard to get gold. You gotta, have these machines, you gotta find them in those like hills and mountains, you gotta like dig. It's really physically labor intensive. It's scarce, it's really hard to get. Same thing with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin uses the same terminology with miners. They have to do a lot of math exercises to get a Bitcoin or any Bitcoin rewards. And all of the supply that's created is hard-coded into software. And people will say like, well, someone could just like rewrite the code or hack the code and change that. No, not really, because they would have to hack the code of thousands and thousands and thousands of machines to be able to hack that code. And the likelihood of someone being able to do that, pretty near zero. So Bitcoin's top supply, remember, is 21 million Bitcoin. There's a supply chart of how it's being created, and everyone knows exactly what that rate is. And at the end, there's no more Bitcoin created forever, right? So again, like that supply demand, there's a limited amount of supply, but the demand will continue to increase, as we've seen in the marketplace today, because price of Bitcoin now is $40,000. Durability. Paper money, US dollars, is not durable. I can burn it, I can rip it, it fades over time. Gold is durable, right? Gold is gold is gold. It doesn't disappear or melt away. Bitcoin is also durable. Yes, it's computer and software. So, if we all lose the internet connection, then, that's the hard part. But in general, Bitcoin is durable. Gold is durable. What else was I going to say? Oh, US dollar. If you look at the supply of US dollars too, another side note, we're already in digital world. So most of the world is already operating in terms of transactions and finances and tracking of dollars. It's all digital anyway today. So we're already at digital, but Bitcoin is super digital. It was natively created for a digital environment. Fungible and divisibility. So I want to buy a coffee and I have a gold bar. Ideally, I slice a little piece off that's worth, the cup of coffee, and I give you that little bit of gold, right? Same thing with US dollars. You have 100 cents in every $1 US. So I want to buy a cup of coffee for $1, not possible anymore. You see, inflation's. No. So Bitcoin can be divided into Satoshis. And so there are 100 cents in every $1 US. There are 100 million Satoshis in every one Bitcoin. So in terms of scalability and divisibility, Bitcoin kind of wins. You can divide a cent into 100. You can divide a Bitcoin into 100 million. And when I originally got into this, I was like, I can't do the math. What's Satoshi? 100 million? Who can even think in 100 millions, right? So thought I'd teach you Satoshis quickly. So today, the price of Bitcoin is about 40,000 for the simplicity of math, right? To figure out the number of Satoshis in $1, you take $1 and you divide it by 0.000400000, and you get 2,500 Satoshis, or sats for short. So $1 today will buy you 2,500 sats. And if Bitcoin continues to scale, side note, this 2,500 sats might equal, say, like $250 eventually, or $2,500 eventually, right? Sats becomes the new denomination, not Bitcoin. Want you to also note that there are 8 decimal places out. So remember, 100 million Satoshis equals 1 Bitcoin. So to get that number, you go out 8 decimal places. And not everyone is great at math or like decimal places. So literally you kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 decimal places. And at the end, you put in the price of Bitcoin. So I highlighted Bitcoin price is $40,000 right now. Hence, 0.00400000. And that's how you do the math. It takes a little bit of practice, but I think the more we get used to using Satoshis and understanding it, the more comfortable we will be with Bitcoin. All right, back to Bitcoin fundamentals. Censorability. For those in the United States, this doesn't seem to like click as well, but if you're in different countries like Turkey and Venezuela and countries where the money supply is really having difficulty, it's really difficult to get US dollars in other countries. You have to buy US dollars in black markets and gray markets. So in terms of censorability, gold is really physically heavy. So if I had all of my wealth stored in gold, then I would just need to carry these giant gold bars and like put them somewhere, right? And if the government decided that they really needed money really quickly, they could come into my room basically and be like, give me all your gold bars. And here's a piece of paper and I owe you gold bars. I mean, you may or may not get it back. And this actually has happened in the history of the United States, right? Paper money is government owned. So the government doesn't have to come into my home and say like, give me all your money. We need to pay debts, you know, national emergency. Now they just print more money. They don't need to ask us for a permission. They just print more money and they're essentially taking money out of my room. Bitcoin, they can't really do that. I mean, obviously, like if you're using like a centralized exchange to process your Bitcoin transactions and you're storing your Bitcoin in centralized places, then you're kind of in trouble to the jurisdiction that your Bitcoin is being housed in. So like if you're housing your money at Bitcoin money at Coinbase, right? Coinbase is a US entity. They're in San Francisco, California. And the government, US government says, hey, I want to know everything about all your customers at Coinbase, which they have. Coinbase says, here are all the people in the United States that have Coinbase accounts and we KYC them, and now, you know, that'll make your tax, you know, tracking and hunting easier, right? Well, what if, you know, the US government says, ooh, you know, this quantitative easing thing's not working out anymore. Hey, Coinbase, we need all the Bitcoin. Actually, while you're at it, give me all the Ether too. This is a real possibility. But if you really embrace all of the features that owning and being part of Bitcoin does, then actually, if you hold your Bitcoin in a decentralized place and you really take advantage of the public-private key features, no one can take your Bitcoin away. No one can come to my house and be like, give me all your Bitcoin. Yeah, well, I mean, someone put a gun to your head and said like, hey, you know, give me your private keys, and you're like, I don't know. It's a whole nother story. So Bitcoin fundamentals, portability. Obviously, gold is really big and heavy. And I said, if I put all of my wealth into gold bars, I could put it all into my room. But like, you know, say, you know, I need to move, and I'm gonna have to get some wheelbarrows and a couple suitcases and wheel out my gold. Probably not that easy, right? Paper money is pretty easy to carry, but you know, if I want to buy a house with paper money, today we have digital transactions and paper checks, which help with that transaction. But if I really wanted to do it with paper money, you know, you're looking at suitcases and suitcases of money, right? It's not actually that portable. Thank God, because it's digital today, it's pretty easy to port around. Well, Bitcoin was fundamentally natively created and designed for a digital environment. So it's super easy to carry, as we know, because we're all enjoying this whole digital experience today. Bitcoin is verifiable. So gold is physical. So, you know, you can come into my house and be like, yep, she's got the gold. Verified, right? Paper money is physical too. Or, you know, I mean, in terms of the US government, you know, you can go and look at people's bank transactions, which is why they really want all of this stuff tracked through the banks. And then Bitcoin is ultimately the most verifiable because, you know, I send my friend Angie, you know, $100. Everyone in the world can see like, yep, this wallet sent $100 worth of Bitcoin to Angie at this time, at this place, and it's been confirmed. And by confirmations, I put an orange little box around it. 92 confirmations for this particular transaction. That means 92 different machines have said, yep. This transaction is real and it's done. And will never, ever be able to be reversed or changed. It is forever hard-coded into the history of Bitcoin forever to the end of time. And you cannot do that with paper money today. You can't even do that with the US dollar because, you know, hackers can go into lots of places and steal email addresses, let alone your social security number, right? Hackers can also go into this particular computer and, you know, take over my Zoom meeting. Hackers can go in and mess with your bank accounts. They cannot do that with Bitcoin. Ooh. So here's the summary of money. And when you look at the features and characteristics of what is good money, sound money, those are definitions of, hello? Hard money. Sound money equals hard money equals Bitcoin. And these are the characteristics that we have learned over time through human history of what is good money. And if you look at the history of money, you know, we started with shells and pieces of thread and bracelets and rocks, and it's a really, really rich history, human history. And then we got into like silver and gold, and then we ended up with paper. But ultimately, we're looking for money that's verifiable, divisible, portable, durable. You know, like, you know, trading bananas is great and delicious, but someone's gonna eat it and then I've lost my wealth, right? Scarcity. I mean, Bitcoin is new, it's 10 to 12 years old, but technology moves fast. I mean, if you look at the history today, like 10 years ago, I was driving using MapQuest printouts in my car. I would have never, ever imagined that I would have turn-by-turn directions on my phone today, right? You know, 10 years ago, there wasn't Airbnb, there wasn't a whole host of things that we enjoy today. So software is really, really fast. And so 10 years of Bitcoin history is actually really long in the world of history of technology, you know? Censorship resistant, and then just unforgeable costliness. It's open, it's decentralized. And then if you look at the history of fiat money, it always ends badly. And the US dollar will not be in any way an exception to this at all. Today, we're looking at the Turkish lira. I mean, we just had a nanny that we work with from Turkey, and she's horrified, and she's been, you know, seriously traumatized by what she experienced in Turkey before she came to the United States. It's bad. You know, Venezuela, people talk about Venezuela all the time. That's a very bad situation, right? This is what inflation is going on. And the United States is no exception to that. We're in hyperinflation today. You know, on the low end, and there is no number out there right now, on the low end, you know, you might conservatively say like the inflation rate for the past few years in the United States has been more like 10%. That's bad. You know, at 2-3%, the prices of everything is doubling every 20 years. But now you're at like on the low end, the inflation rate of the true inflation rate of the United States has been 10%. That means the price of everything has been doubling every 3-4 years. And like, this hasn't been spread equally, right? But I talk about my example where I went to McDonald's and bought like 2 meals and a Happy Meal and cost me $32. What, right? Zimbabwe. We have, you know, billion-dollar bills from Zimbabwe that we bought off eBay. But can you imagine, like, if eventually that the US had to print like billion-dollar US dollar bills because we're in hyperinflation or stagflation? We're in hyperinflation right now in the US. At the end of the day, the problem with fiat money, this experiment that started in 1971, is human nature. You know, I'd like to believe that everybody in government, those that are supposed to be civil servants, are working for the people, putting others before themselves. They're not human because they're not greedy and not selfish, and, you know, don't have all the human frailties that affect most of us. At the end, whoever's in control of the money, and because it's really easy to just hit print, and in the United States, it's not printing paper money, it's literally like a line of code that like magically creates this money into all these digital ledgers across many central banks. it's so easy. There's no cost to print more money. And as a result, we're going to continue to print more money. And that's the end of my spiel. I will open it up for questions now.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah. So Bitcoin supply is capped, and I've been doing some research, and it's capped at about like 21 million, right? So, and I also found out, yeah, exactly 21 million. And I also found out that it will be mined around like 2140 is the projection right now. And so there's clearly a cap supply, and there's already a demand from billionaires, from institutions, and they're just snatching up so much right now, and the price is going up. So then if all these rich people get all the digital gold and all this very, very profitable and expensive commodity to themselves, and then what's left for ordinary people like us, right? Is that really going to help us close the gap between the wealthy and the poor, or really drive equality? Or is it going to have a similar effect like fiat money, where the system is designed to just make rich people more rich and just leave us with nothing? How is Bitcoin then better than the current system that we currently have? Does that make sense, what I'm trying to get at?
Mm-hmm. There's many ways to answer that question. So one way to answer that question is typically when a new asset class is introduced, it's only accredited investors and those very wealthy that get first access to that new asset. Bitcoin's different because it started from the bottom. The institutional investors are just starting to get it. But the people have had access to it for 10 plus years. And so it started with the people and now is moving up the food chain. That's one way to look at it. Two, I mean, if you're looking at those billionaires and institutional investors, when they come in, and a couple of them have, not all of them yet, they need to diversify their portfolios, and they're going to eventually need to sell or not sell, right? Some whales will need to liquidate just so that they can get some more, I don't know, ether that's growing at a faster rate or whatever it is. Those are opportunities where more of this Bitcoin will come into the marketplace for people to acquire. It probably won't be at the price of $40,000 per Bitcoin. It may be more or less, but you'll have opportunities. Another way to look at that is I just gave some examples of countries that are not doing so well because of their fiat money situation. So there are about 187 countries and nations in the world. Well, eventually, this is one of the hypotheses that are out there, and hypotheses that I really believe in. Imagine if the bottom 50 countries of the 187, in terms of GDP and developing nations. Let's take Turkey. They go, screw this is not going well for me. Our new national currency is no longer the lira, it is Bitcoin. Bam, right? And you have more countries doing that. So as Bitcoin goes up, whole nations will rise, and it really becomes the great equalizer globally, because this is the one and only asset that truly is global today. All you need is your third-hand phone and interconnection, and you have the railways and this access to this financial product that anybody in the world can access. It truly is the global first technology and money. So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully gives you some perspective that I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Thank you.
I kind of want to piggyback off of that question, not to beat the dead horse, Arry.
Go ahead.
But hi, Arry.
Beat it. Hi. I know.
So first, I am kicking myself in the butt because in 2012, I was at South by Southwest, and they literally had a Bitcoin vending machine, and you could stick cash in and you could buy Bitcoin. I literally was I at least gotta go see this machine. I'll put in $50, and I think I just was hungover and I didn't wake up in time and missed out on Bitcoin in 2012.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then when I saw it crash, I was like, whew, okay, it never came to fruition, but look at it now. So to piggyback off the last question, you know, you need a phone and you need internet access. So when you look at poor communities who don't have phones and internet access, that is, I mean, that's the bigger question. If we stop thinking about ourselves and the rest of the world, how does this work? If the rich people hoard Bitcoin, then the average citizen can still trade and like get Bitcoin. Like we can still go on the stock market because we have internet with, you know, maybe, you know, the little income that we have. But what about like the homeless and the people in other countries who just don't have access to internet, can't afford a cell phone? Like, I don't know who's responsible for that plan, make it that mainstream, but how have people been addressing that question? How is Bitcoin going to help poverty around the world?
I used to work in a company that dealt with micropayments. So like 0.8 of a penny in terms of micropayments. And I have like real examples of customers that we had. You know, we had hundreds of thousands of customers around the world earning 0.8 of a penny. 0.8 of a penny in the US is like, is that even a thing, right? And in some countries in the world, it is a thing, 0.8 of a penny. And they were earning it in the form of Satoshis. Remember, that's the smallest denomination of Bitcoin. And back then, Bitcoin was $300 a Bitcoin or $400 a Bitcoin, right? And, you know, they were doing these micro tasks, you know, like they were, you know, identifying all the oranges in a photo, or, you know, telling me which photo had blue in it, right? Doing simple tasks, and they were earning like 1-2 cents a task. And Bitcoin in 2015-16, it went up to like, you know, 3,000-4,000 up and up, right? And we had customers reaching out to us that had earned cents, like 3-4 cents. You know, now it's like 10 cents or 20 cents. They're saying like, oh my God, this has changed my life. I can actually like buy lunch and buy food. Like that's what's happening right now. And yes, not everybody will have access to this, but that's changing. Like we are putting down those internet railways across the world. From the customers that I work with in the micropayments business, they had access to internet and a third-hand phone more easily than they had to like a computer or a house, or let alone a table in their home, right? So it's actually far more accessible than we realize, and it'll get more and more accessible as more of us come online and realize what's going on. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's not, you know, like for those of us that are aware, we have to do what we can to, you know, have impact. So we're not, you know, the king on top of a anthill where everyone is suffering around us. You just, you know, we have to do what we can. So that's that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the best I can do right now.
Yeah, I think the main question was, is the industry just thinking about these things?
They are. I mean, like, you know, people are planting out 5G. So like 5G is, you know, they have their own initiatives to get 5G to every country in the world, right? And, you know, nations are putting down internet. Other questions?
I do. I have a couple. But I want to piggyback on Caroline. Yeah, but
Okay.
But Caroline, you were telling us that in 2012 you had the Bitcoin machine and you missed it. So like around 10 years ago, I had a beautiful listing, and a broker came to me and said, hey, I have this techie guy who wants to buy this house with Bitcoins. I just cannot imagine how low the sellers would have been today if they would have accepted. And we all were like, what? Like,
yeah.
And my managing broker is that like we don't know what to do with that. It has to be in US currency, right? Or like some sort of a currency that can be translated into US currency and put in the bank, because that's what we are ready for. But going back about also your other point, Caroline, that you just brought up, I think it's so interesting, because when you're looking at all the TV shows and everything that's happening out there, everybody's so afraid that Big Brother is watching. So essentially, this entire world's going to have under internet and wireless and security and so many people's problem is that like, how do I get off grid instead of get on grid? So I think what technology is expanding, definitely. So I'm also looking at Bitcoin as part of the human evolution. Like if you're looking at or evolution as a humankind, it took us so long to get to a certain point, right? But in this last little bit of time, technology has changed just so much in so short period of time of our behavior that eventually we all have to go digital no matter what. Like when you're using your credit card, that's real money, but not real money, because, and that's why you're spending it like crazy, because you don't go through the experiences like, you know, when you're paying for something, right? So I think that Bitcoin is just the first of many other payments that's going to be out there. And it's laying the foundation of something more secure and something more lasting and changing our behavior. So I don't see Bitcoin any other way, because like you pay in gold, you pay in lira, you pay in Bitcoin is just an additional form of covering certain things. But understanding of how secure it is, I think that is the way to go. I don't know if it's going to be Bitcoin or whatever is going to be 20 years from now, but it's a version of that. But my question that I try to lead up with the last 10 minutes is, when you said that, you know, if you're sending money to NG and everybody can see it, everybody's verifying it. So many times people want to hide their money or want to hide their wealth and stuff like that, right? So how does it going to for people who don't want people to know of how much money they have or what kind of a transaction they are in? How does it look for that? Because some people just private.
Yeah, so your right to privacy is something that's being questioned and in question every day today. So I think it's really important for us as citizens to really stay attuned to and pay attention to what's going on in the policy world, right? So we have, you know, Newsom that proposed some bill that, you know, will basically kill a lot of that very recently. And so we should all, you know, go check that out and write some words of wisdom to tell them to stop doing that. When it comes to Bitcoin fundamentals, the transactions are pseudonymous. And so, you know, yes, it's in an open ledger and you can see every transaction that's happening in the world on Bitcoin because it's fully, you know, decentralized and transparent. But I don't know if Mariana's, you know, attached to this address or that address or that address. That only happens if Mariana tells somebody in the network that this is me. And then that person, because everything is electronic and networked, will be able to, and you know, there's bots running around the interweb. So some bot will be like, ooh, Mariana like attached herself to this address. And now we know forever to the end of time that that address was attached to Mariana, right?
Exactly.
So
you can't switch it. Like I could switch bank account numbers, right? But you can switch it because now you're that, right? Or like, can you transfer the name?
So there's different ways to do that. Like you can go to a physical place and then give someone some money and they'll give you some Bitcoin and then you like put it, you know, into an address and then never attach that address to any particular piece of personal identity. And then it becomes your pseudonymous place. And then if you ever want to spend it, then you have to do some weird things to like offload it into something where you can like do transactions. And there's different kinds of cryptocurrency that also handle that sort of experience. But in our day-to-day transactions, or like, you know, when I do transactions with Target, you know, they get all of my personal information and then some. It will create a much more secure and scalable way for, you know, when an entity gets hacked like Target did, my personal information won't be spread all over the interwebs in an uncontrollable manner. Now, like, they get my wallet address is out, but it will take a lot of work for anybody to figure out, you know, it's attached to me. And then even when it gets to me, like they have to do a lot of work to be able to figure out how to get it, right? You can't, Bitcoin as a network has never been hacked, for one, right? Like centralized places like Target, or, you know, centralized exchanges like a Target are the ones that are getting hacked and they're mismanaging it. So like that's the kind of benefit of Bitcoin, but I don't know if that answered your question. Hopefully it did.
To some extent, yeah. And my other question is, you know, because we do business advisory so much, and my boyfriend does next level estate planning and trustee and security and business advisory. And one of the things he's advising people about is that in what entity or how do you keep your money not to be sued, right? To be protected. But I don't know if Bitcoin is part of that discovery, you know, like if you want to hide your money, right? Then you just create this ledger that nobody knows about, right? and
Mhm.
and you cash in your money, you put it over there, but can it be subpoenaed? You know, like is this going to be, and that's the whole thing about when we go back to that, like, is it all criminals or whatever? But the question is, if it can be subpoenaed or something, then I'm pretty sure that they're also interested in like how to take their money in certain ways, because money laundering is a thing. Like, you own companies, like, you know, so it's in a sense of protecting my assets from, because you started how many companies, right? So then you're smart about how much money is attached to my name versus the family versus, you know, that's why
Yeah.
I'm.
I mean, the U.S. is still like catching up, and globally, the world is still catching up on the policy side of, you know, how this is actually legally managed. And so I don't know how that's going to end up, which is why it's, again, really important that we stay really attuned to what's happening on the policy front, and which is why I spend a significant amount of my time on the policy front. Is we really need to watch and be careful, because, you know, we can have a lot of unintended consequences from the policies that unknowing or maybe knowing policymakers make. In terms of like, where does, you know, if you're getting a divorce, can my spouse, you know, like ask for my Bitcoin? Well, you know, depends on how you manage that. You know, not every person knows about Bitcoin. Not everyone knows if their spouse has Bitcoin or doesn't have Bitcoin. Bitcoin can be stored online or offline. Bitcoin can be stored in an exchange or not in exchange. Bitcoin can be stored in an exchange that's in the United States or not in the United States. It can be pulled into, you know, put into a hard wallet and then stored in the Bank of Switzerland or the Cayman Islands. There's lots of ways that people will and do get around it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but there's lots of ways to manage that. And I mean, really at the end of the day, like, you can also set it up where, you know, like, you would have to know, like, who are the people that can open up a particular wallet. All those people have to know about each other or not know about each other. I mean, how I do like corporate fiduciary spreading out the risk. So like, you know, company has $10 million. You know, we split it into several different wallets. Not all wallets are the same. Each wallet has a, you know, multiple people have to come in and put in their key for it to unlock it, for you to be able to move the funds. Usually in a corporate situation, the way I set it up, the 3 people don't know about each other. So even, you know, Jack was like, ooh, I got a key, but I don't know who the other 2 people are. He would have to go and figure out who the other 2 people are. And they may not all be in the company. They may be like board members or investors or advisors, right? And then even when you go to the key part, you know, like, there's private key and then there's the seed words. And so you could take the private key and put it on a piece of paper and not have it anywhere on any of your computers, rip it into several pieces and put those pieces of papers in different places, right? Into bank vaults. And not everyone has access to the bank vault. So like, sometimes you can have a bank vault where it only opens when 3 people show up with their identity to enter the bank vault. Same thing with the seed words, you can rip it into different pieces. So there's different ways to manage that to make it extremely difficult for anything to ever happen. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, yes and no, you know, because like
Okay.
everything you say, I have more questions to ask, because, you know, this is an investment, right? So like, I do investment type of real estate. Is it like, how do you take, you know, ownership and stuff like that? And one of the things is that like, okay, if it's so secretive that some people don't necessarily know about it, how does it traces down to your estate? And if you do this like secretive stuff, maybe like you need to be disclosing it to your attorney. How do your kids know? You know, like, what are they looking for? And they're burning these little pieces of paper, like, oh, this is just like, it gets lost. And when it gets lost, how is there's no way to discover it? Or, you know, like there's just so many questions to ask about how to handle this.
Well, there's lots of different ways, but each person has to make their own decision on how they handle it for their particular selves, entity, or family, or whatever. Yeah. So that's a very personal question. The only thing I can do is give you like all the different ways it could happen, and you have to make your own decision and then handle it. Yeah.
So Arry, I think the biggest question that I'm kind of waiting for people to ask is, when and how should we buy, or how do we get involved?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways. I have a call right now. So there are lots of ways to get into Bitcoin. One of the ways that I really recommend is Swan Bitcoin. So because they have the lowest fees. Let me grab my link as I try and talk. Lowest fees. It's really, really easy to use. Their I mean, you don't have to like learn how to use like all these, you know, technology things that can really overwhelm some people. And you can do dollar cost averaging, which is what we really recommend. You know, like I know a lot of people are telling me like, hey, Harry, when should I buy? I'm like, I can't tell you when to buy. Here, let me put in the code for Swan Bitcoin. This gives you $10 of free Bitcoin for signing up. Oops. Everyone.
And along with that, I think, Arry, you should also give everyone the tax tip to make sure that you can keep a record of your transactions for tax record keeping purposes.
Yeah, so if you use an app, like they have the transactions all there for you. So you just literally have to copy paste when you do taxes. And you pay taxes when you usually sell. So it's sort of like a capital gains you would pay on like a stock. But if you're managing it by yourself, then every time you buy at a price, you want to have a different wallet address for that particular time and price. Otherwise, the IRS will like blanket bulk and decide what price you're dealing with in terms of buy and sell, and they decide for you. So my recommendation is if you're not handling it through something like a Swan Bitcoin or a Coinbase or something like that, then you want to make sure that you have a different specific wallet address. You're literally doing this manually in like a Google spreadsheet. You're tracking the date, the amount, the price of you know, at that date, and then just go from there.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you gotta decide like, I'm gonna sell at this price from this wallet versus that price at that wallet, and it gives you the ultimate control, or else it's all big batch bulked.
Right. I've purchased from a couple different places, Coinbase, Pro, and Cash App, but I know they have different prices because they're different exchanges or whatnot. So I've been just manually keeping record just for my own sanity. I don't have much, but I think that's just helpful for your own tax purposes.
Yeah, and I like Cash App too. Cash App also has dollar cost averaging, which means you say like, I'm gonna buy $100 a week, and don't try and time the market because the market will do what it can. And then, you know, if you happen to be at the right place at the right time and the price is lower than you want, then, you know, you might put in $200 that week. But trying to time the market, I know I have like, I think 10 people at least like pinged me yesterday saying like, hey, will there be a dip, and how much of a dip? I'm gonna wait for the dip. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if the dip is gonna be from 40K or 60K, or like if the dip's gonna go down to 20K or like, you know, 35K. I don't know. Like, no one does. And so there's so many different factors that affect it. And, you know, yeah, so dollar cost averaging is really the way to go. Can we reach out if we think of other questions? Yeah, I can give you my email address, yellowumbrellaventures.com, or you can tweet at me. There's a thing called crypto Twitter. And so if you want to learn more about that space, like literally follow a bunch of folks. There's some really good ones to follow, or you can just ping me and I'll tell you which ones to follow. But crypto Twitter is really a good way to figure out like what's happening in this crypto universe, especially around Bitcoin. You just kind of have to listen to it and read it with a critical eye. And then there's lots of different resources out there. I would always just start with like the super like really well-known tried and true resources. There's a series of essays by Parker Lewis at the Nakamoto Institute. There's like bitcoin.org, a Swan Bitcoin that I just put in the link. I really like them because they have really, really great educational resources along with it. And they also have a really, really great product that's good for everybody. Typically, like the people that are buying $10 are paying the highest prices in terms of the spread. And so that's what really makes me mad. Coinbase is really, really expensive to buy Bitcoin. I would avoid it unless you're using Coinbase Pro, then, you know, the fees are much better. Are you into other cryptocurrencies like Ether, Stellar, etc.? I personally am only Bitcoin. I'm pretty conservative in general. My husband is much more, I guess, advanced. What other questions?
Arry, I have a question. Is there any way, I'm sure there might be helpful resources out there, or books that you just mentioned, post on the Women Invest Network. So maybe whether we could purchase or just review, you probably have more resources than us. When you have a chance, if you could do a post on that.
On books or just general resources?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, about Bitcoin. And then another thing is when we see Bitcoin drop or, you know, increase, when's the best time to sell, to liquidate it? is there even a such thing? Because like, what should we be looking for?
So that's your own personal choice. Like I give the example, I bought Apple stock at $40 and it doubled, went to 80, and I sold it all. And I was like, well, you know, a double is like pretty good return. Like, ta-da! And off I went. And then I like, you know, used it to buy my condo, and you know, that didn't do as well as Bitcoin, obviously, or Apple stock. So it's your own personal decision. If you're talking to like a hardcore Bitcoiner or people that really believe in the space, like for me, I'm going to say like never sell. Why would you ever sell? No, hell no, hell freaking no way. So yeah, it really depends on your own personal like goals and aspirations and what's right for your family. You know, some people will say like, well, I bought a bunch at 3,000 or 20,000 or whatever, and I'm going to sell when it's at 50,000 for a little bit to, you know, just get some cash and, you know, go pay down my house or whatever. And then another person will say like, I'm going to wait till it's 100K. Everyone has their own strategy around it. So that's all I can say.
Okay, thank you. It's very nice meeting everybody. I'm going to log off. Thank you. Thank you, Arry.
I have to run too, but you know, so Caroline, did you raise your hand, or do you still have your hand raised?
If you can take one more question.
Yeah, I'll take one more. And then I have to run
too. Okay, I mean, my other question kind of was already answered. Like for those that have kind of missed out on the early stages of Bitcoin, like what other cryptocurrency is kind of like bubbling right now? If you don't have an answer to that, you know, we'll all do our research. But the second question is, and I saw it, I think you posted it on the Facebook page too. The other currency that they said was more of a security, and so it wasn't a cryptocurrency. Like, what's the chances of that happening all the time? That someone gets excited about a crypto and then they say, oh, it's actually in a different category, and what does that mean, a cryptocurrency versus a security?
Well, I mean, a lot of those rules are like really being defined, and you know, every cryptocurrency has a lot of risks. So Bitcoin is the only one that's really, really decentralized. Everything else is generally like centralized. Ethereum, I guess you could argue that it's decentralized too. But most other cryptocurrencies like what was it, Ripple? I can't remember the ticker right now. XRP was recently like smacked down. It's super centralized. Like the company that issued it, you know, kept a bunch of the supply for themselves. You know, there's a lot of issues in how they talk about it. You know, if you want to hold someone accountable, there really is someone to hold accountable, and that's the centralized part of it. And so, just really, really be careful. You know, having been in an ICO world myself, and I created a token out of thin air, which means I created money out of thin air. It's really, really easy to create money out of thin air, especially with DeFi products today. So you can like literally copy a bunch of code and like put in a couple of symbols, and boom, you know, you created money out of thin air. And if it trades just because, you know, people feel it, like it, you know, like Dogecoin, you know, the thing that looks like a little dog, the dog icon, created out of thin air, right? And it now has value. So just be really careful, you know, the way you would sell anything. Like I'm a person that sells something. I'm going to put like the best people on it. I'm going to make sure the resume looks really good. I'm going to talk about it in a certain way. I'm going to say it's supported by whatever different entities. I'm going to try and give it as much credibility as possible. I'm going to write white papers that look really, really legit and really, really sound. Just look at everything with a super critical eye. And that's why I think like, don't just look on the internet, like talk to actual real human beings face to face and get perspectives. Like that's how we're gonna really fight misinformation and disinformation in general. And then, you know, like if they say like, you know, Bill Gates is their advisor on their particular crypto project, like, you know, go look it up. You know, like is Bill Gates likely to be the advisor for this particular crypto project? Is it really like legit? Like do your homework and don't just take things at face value. And you know, like I can't really give you advice on like cryptocurrencies to buy or not buy. You know, I have ones that I am fans of or not fans of, but I'm not in that position to really like, you know, talk about that. I mean, the other big one that people are really excited about is Ethereum, but again, Ethereum's only like 5-6 years old. And so as a technology, Bitcoin, you know, 10-12 years old versus 5-6 years old, it's a far more mature. Things have been tried, you know, it's forked a lot, it's had its wars, it's, you know, gone. And so today it's like pretty secure, which is why you have big guys like Drunken Miller and institutions putting in their funds. Ether has still a way to go. So you could say like Ether is like, you know, where Bitcoin was 5 years ago. So there's opportunity there, but there's also a lot of risk, right? So don't play with money that you can't afford to lose is kind of the lesson too. Okay, well then email me if you have any questions. I do this every week, every Friday at 12. So feel free to hop on, ask questions, email me. I do my very best to like share as much as I can. I'm on Twitter. I answer questions via Twitter. Yeah, so I'm here to help, but I really, really believe like the more we can do to like educate ourselves, educate each other, share information, the better we all are, and ask a lot of questions and stay in the know, especially when it comes to your own money, your finances, and you know the policymakers, because we all live in under different jurisdictions. Really get to know like who's making the laws, because now they're really going to affect us, especially when we go into this digital space. Cool. Thank you so much for joining me. It was great to see you. I'm so excited that you're interested, and the opportunity is really great. I mean, just this world is really great. The culture is really, really good. It's all about openness and transparency and togetherness and community. I mean, that's what I really love about the space. So it's not, you know, it's actually a really good space.
What are you doing?
Stuck inside.